Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Let's go back in time a little bit. Before I owned and operated AmSpirit Business Connections, I was part of another networking organization. It was called Network Professionals. I joined it in 1995, and I took to it like a fish to water. Did well through it, and ultimately had an opportunity to become its first franchisee. And then ultimately, I bought that out and rebranded that as AmSpirit Business Connections. Easy for me to say. And I didn't buy the whole organization. I basically bought what I had. But when I became the franchisee, I was all of a sudden the local. It was corporately owned before then. All of a sudden, I'm the local guy owning this, and there weren't a lot of chapters. I've looked back, there may be 5, 6, 7 chapters at the time. And so when I first took over, it was June of 97. I systematically went around and visited the chapters that were in existence. And it was a little different then because there wasn't a lot of what we call area-wide things. There weren't a lot of things going on between groups. There really wasn't a website that listed everybody. There wasn't events. You might meet presidents in other chapters. You might not even know chapters were out there. So I'm going out and I'm kind of being this liaison to these chapters. I'm running this. I'm in charge here locally, and I want to make it better. So I systematically went and visited groups, and there was one that I visited, the Powell chapter. I remember they met on Wednesday mornings, and they were very welcoming. All the chapters were very supportive of me. To have somebody local who was going to really be behind making the organization better, they were excited. So I go to the Powell chapter and went around the room, and everybody really had nice things to say. They didn't know me, so it wasn't nice things about me necessarily. They were good luck, excited. We're here to support you. Really like this organization, like what it's doing, and it's we're excited. There was one individual, however, who stood up, and I'll give his name because the story really does have a happy ending. Joe Liggett. So Joe Liggett stands up, and he says, I've been in here, 3 years, and I've spent this kind of money and spend this kind of money every week, and blah 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 blah. And I did a tally on it, and when it's all said and done, I've made $1.38. And he sat down, and it was like, oh, that hurt me. I just got involved, but that hurt. It's like, okay, this guy doesn't have a very good opinion of the organization. Can't understand why he's still around, but that's kind of the way that's what he said. And I talked to some people after that, and he's like, yeah, you just have to understand Joe. That's his sense of humor. It falls flat. And in many ways, that was Joe. It's just a snarky sense of humor. But I was not involved in this situation, but the other person who was relayed the story to me, and one of my former directors, David Groh, was, just happened to be golfing. The Powell chapter did a lot of things, and they had a golf outing. And David was kind of late to the party, and so was Joe, and they were the only two left, and they got to golf with each other, just those two. And, as David relays his story, he said it was a great time. We had a great time and got along. And at one point, David picked his moment, and he said, no, Joe, this has been such a fun day. I really have. Really have had a great time. And, I'm kind of glad that the two of us ended up in a twosome, and I really have gotten to know you. But I got to tell you, people don't see this side of you. This is what people see. And I wish people could see today, because you're just you're just such a genuine, great person. Um, and Joe was totally taken back by that. Joe was like, really? He said, yeah, people, you know, people just, have a different view of you. They don't know how to take your humor. And, Joe didn't quit over that. No, I mean, but Joe took that to heart and was just a different person. I mean, he didn't, he was a little more measured in what he had to say and, was complimentary when he needed to be complimentary and tried to let people know when he was, when he was making light of a situation. And things really improved for Joe. Joe became a director in the organization. Joe was a huge help for me in the early 4 or 5 years of growing what is now AmSpirit Business Connections. He's retired. He's living in South Carolina now. Great person. Can't say enough great things about Joe Liggett. I often wonder about that moment, that golf outing with David Groh. And if that conversation didn't happen, where Joe might be, where, what I might feel about him, what a lot of people might feel about him. And so, if they think about that, I just ran into an article that was on Cyblog. It says, "Does the truth really hurt? The surprising power of honesty in relationships." And it goes on and it talks about studies. They did a study with 214 couples. And I get, okay, you know, marital couples, people dating is different than business. Arguably yes, arguably no. But what they found is that when people had an honest opportunity to be honest with their partner, as long as it was done well, it was well received. It was well received. You know what? I'll tell you right now. I'll be totally honest. I'm not perfect. Well, there's no honesty there. I'm not perfect. Trust me, I'm not perfect. Um, but the honesty part of it is I don't want to hear about my shortcomings. I really don't. But by the same token, I want to hear about my shortcomings. I really do. And I know those two things are in conflict with one another. And if you really, if you understand what I'm saying, I don't want the hurtful words. I don't want to, I don't want to see what's in the mirror, in the rearview mirror, the things like, I don't want to see what's in my blind spot. Um, but I need to see what's there. I do need to see that what's there, and I want to see what's there. I do want to improve, and I think most people are like that. I think it's a hard thing to hear, and it was probably hard for Joe to hear, but he was better for it, and I think we're all better for it. Kudos to David Groh. David Groh, I don't want to say had, because he's still alive. He's doing well. He's out there, very successful, um, very good at having those honest conversations with him. In fact, I remember he had an honest conversation with me in the very early days of AmSpirit Business Connections. I had just had just bought this thing. I needed to rebrand it. That was part of the deal. And I had come up with the name AmSpirit Business Connections. And there's a whole podcast episode probably around that name. Um, and it didn't go over well when I first announced the name. But at any rate, one of the early decisions that I was faced with was, do I replace everybody's name badge? Because everybody in the organization gets a name badge, and everybody had a name badge that said Network Professionals. And I did the math, what it was going to cost me to replace everybody's name badge, and I just wrote the biggest check I'd ever written to buy the organization, and I didn't want to spend any more money. Not that I was cheap, but it was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen here? And so I didn't want to spend the money. And if you were standing in my shoes, you probably would have been the same way. Took a second mortgage out on our house to do this, and it all worked out, obviously. But in the moment, it doesn't feel like it's going to work out. There's no guarantees. There's never a guarantee. A lot of times, these things will fail. But at any rate, I didn't want to buy name badges, and David he called me up. He didn't sit me down, but he had me sit down. Hey, let's talk about this, and we just talked it through. He didn't tell me what I needed to do. He just said, "Hey, listen, this is the way I see it. This is the way other people see it. And I know it's going to cost you money, but this is really an opportunity." And in that call, the way he handled it was a very calm, yeah, you're not wrong, you're not cheap, you're not stupid, you're not, just think about this. Take a deep breath and think about it. And I can only imagine that was the conversation he had with Joe Liggett. Just a deep, I care about you. I care about you, and I think you'll be better. I think we'll be better. I think everybody will be better if you can just see this and act on it. So, obviously, you don't want to hear your imperfections. I don't want to hear mine. I get it. But be open to it. Challenge people if they're doing it to do it in the right way. But the flip side of that is that you see other things that people struggle with, and you might be hesitant to say anything to them because you're afraid as to what it might do to your relationship. I get it. I get it. You need to have the courage. I need to have the courage just to have those conversations. And, much like I imagine the conversation that David Groh had with Joe Liggett, just, I think we'll be better for this. You're not a bad person, but there's a shortcoming here. And if we can just address this shortcoming, you'll be a better person. And we'll have a better relationship. And everything will be better. And really at its core, that's what networking is about. It's about improving one another. And networking, give me a referral, send me business. Yeah, I get that. Sometimes it's these little soft skill things that really make the biggest difference for us.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.